So, hello and welcome to session 23 of our Tarot On video sequence here live during the pandemic of 2020. At the time of recording, there was some sad news just now that our UK Prime Minister has just been taken into intensive care, which is sad news. I hope that everyone is looking after themselves and staying as safe and sound as possible. So what we're going to do today is we're going to carry on with our NLP sessions. We are going to be taking a look at some of the uses of NLP in a tarot card reading, and I'm going to be carrying on introducing some of the ideas that I've introduced into tarot and NLP from my own practice as well. So what we're going to do is also, I have a little bedtime story from Italo Calvino, Invisible Cities, another city to explore. So I'm looking forward to reading that. And what else are we going to do today? We are also going to take a look at a model so that we can begin to pin all of our NLP together. It's very important to use all of these things, all of these layers and systems appropriately as layers, and always remember to read the cards. At the end of the day, we're tarot card readers or Lenormand card readers or oracle card readers, I Ching interpreters, whatever we want to use as our oracle, but it's our voice, our interpretation, and as we say, the oracular moment is sacrosanct. Now, just before we start, I also wanted to ask everyone to say hello to Raissa from India. I can't remember, I think actually she's in Pakistan. I think she's in Pakistan, but it's always 2 a.m. at this time, I believe, so she always misses this, so hello. And I'd like everyone to say hello to Raissa as well, all the way from Walsall as well in the Midlands. So hello, you're missed in the live sessions, but don't worry, you still get the hellos. Okay, so what we're going to cover is NLP, a little bit more about that. So if you need a beginner sort of, the first bit of this introduction, that was yesterday, wherever the videos are stored in the units, it would be unit 22, I guess, that start the NLP sequence. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. It's based on the work of John Grinder and Richard Bandler and others, and it uses language patterns to model the way that our unconscious seems to process things. However, a lot of it is modelled on the work of hypnotherapist Milton H. Erickson and the family therapist Virginia Satir. And one of the things I wanted to cover today is sort of based on Milton H. Erickson's work. There have been some modern books, some contemporary books that have recontextualized his work and redelivered it, and I think they're very useful. But the most useful thing is the work of Rossi and others with transcripts of Erickson's actual work and examples of it. So I'll try and make a reading list as well, because I've got one for the book I'm writing, NLP Magic. So I'll make some recommendations, and I'll make that available in the group for people who are interested in bringing this to their table or to their lives. So one of my favourite stories about Erickson, one of the many stories about Erickson, was he was very well renowned. He was very difficult to get hold of. People would wait a long time to have a session with him because he was known as a bit of a miracle worker, and I think he did promulgate that sort of aspect of his work, but he was quite a realist as well, and really wanted to understand what was working and what wasn't. And one of the my favourite stories is of the guy who went to him and his whole life was in a mess and he wasn't quite sure how to get a grip on his emotions and what was going on for him and his relationship and his work and so on. And Erickson, he had a session with Erickson, and Erickson saw him, and this guy had to, I don't know, come across the whole of the States in order to go and see Erickson wherever he was. And Erickson said to him, right, okay, well, and he had this very slow, drawling voice that I won't even pretend to do. But Erickson apparently said to him, right, okay, well, I will see you, but only until you've done this one thing for me. I want you to go back to your farm. This guy ran a farm. I want you to go back to your farm, and I want you to go out into the fields one day, and I want you to find 10 stones, and I want you to arrange them in order of importance. And when you've done that, then you can come back to me. And he sort of shooed him out. He basically got rid of him. And this guy was very shocked, and Erickson often did a lot of very shocking interventions with people. And which also is very inspiring to the contemporary practitioner. But this guy was very shocked, went away, and eventually phoned the receptionist back up after a long time and said, it's okay, I don't need another appointment, I'm busy reorganising my life, everything's, I've spent the last 6 months making a lot of changes in my life, and my relationship's different, my farm, my practice, everything is very different. And people asked Erickson about this afterwards, and said, what did you do? Did you say something? Did you put some subliminal suggestion in to asking him to go and sort these stones out? Was there something you knew about him that would indicate why sorting stones in particular in a field? Was it the open air? Was it getting him out of the house? What was it that you leveraged there? And Erickson pointed out the fact that what was actually the important thing was what he didn't say. He didn't tell the person, the guy, at all what he meant by the word important. He just forced him out of the room, telling him to sort the stones out into order of importance. So this poor guy had been basically kicked out of Erickson's appointment, no chance of seeing Erickson again until he sorted this problem out, which apparently was an easy one, went out into the field, sorted out 10 stones, and then tried to arrange them in order of importance. But in order to understand that instruction, once he was out in the field, he had to do what in NLP terms, and we'll come back to this in a moment, a transderivational search, basically a search for what's important. What's important. So the guy had spent a whole day in a field asking himself deeply, unconsciously, in order to get this fix from Erickson, what is important. And as a result, that had reorganized the entire concepts inside his own head, and then he'd obviously gone back home and started to make very subtle and very big changes in his life, and forgot totally about going back to Erickson. And it was the lack of information, the deliberate withholding of one piece of the puzzle, that did the work. And a lot of Erickson's work is very similar to this, in what's called a solution-orientated therapy. We lay out, if you imagine like stepping stones, and you just place the stepping stones, which is a bit like we do sometimes in a good tarot card reading, where we lay out the cards and we talk about each card individually, but we try not to put it together. We allow the client to go away and make those connections, make those steps from one stone to another. And that is, yes, exactly, 10 stones, 10 cards. And there's a reason for 10 as well, which we'll come back to at some point along our sessions. But there's a big difference with an NLP approach, a subtle approach, an NLP magic approach, than telling the client what the cards mean for them to do. A far more powerful way of doing it is to incorporate and utilize that sort of ambiguity and allow the client to figure it out. Quite often Erickson would feign ignorance and get the other person to tell him or correct him, and that would put the other person in the responsible position, and Erickson would do that quite often. Another favourite story, and we'll get on to the actual model in a second, is when a young boy came into Erickson with behavioural issues and was stamping his foot, and really stamping his foot, and Erickson started stamping his foot as well, and just stamping and stamping and stamping, and the boy sort of said something like, oh, why are you stamping? And Erickson carried on stamping and said something like, because if I was a big boy then I would not stop. But he said not stop, and the child had to suddenly make this decision about stopping or not stopping, but was confused because Erickson was an adult and so on, and he immediately stopped. And Erickson would quite often incorporate and utilize behavior in order to elicit a altered state, a focus of attention. And this happens in a tarot card reading as well. We can move someone's state up and down whilst we're doing the reading itself, and that allows us to get a very powerful message across from the cards. Okay, now one of the things that comes out of that for me, and this is something I'm including in the book, is this. And it's a little triangle, and it just has three aspects, fourth if you count the middle bit. And to me, it is what I'm thinking about, what I'm triangulating, literally, when I'm doing a reading with somebody, or when I'm doing any change work with somebody. And it's very simple, but I think it's very powerful, because I wanted to boil down what really I've noticed makes big changes in people's lives, particularly in terms of initiation, when people move from one state of awareness of the whole universe to another. What fundamentally changes in that person? It isn't like their ability to speak dolphin, or the fact that they suddenly turn from purple to blue, or something else. There are particular things that are common to a lot of change work, and basically this triangle summarizes them, for me at least. And I like to, when I'm talking to someone, I like to hear what they're saying, and I use this a bit like that Predator special effect of like zooming in, targeting with the little arrows sort of pointing in, and eventually getting a target of what I'm going to work with most in the tarot card reading itself. Okay, and they're basically a number of things. First of all is attention, and attention we can move about in a tarot card reading very easy, because, for example, if we take a look at this card, and you'll notice what you can see in it, your attention is immediately drawn to particular parts of the card. Okay. And I'll come back to what the triangle says as I fill it in, but in the middle of the card is attention. Okay, and just to demonstrate attention, you'll notice where our attention is brought to in this card. Obviously it's either the cups here, or the bridge, or the grey background, or usually this big black cloak, because it's this, it stands out from the card. But I don't know if you've already noticed what I've done in a sort of Ericksonian, I guess, sort of manner, is that I've actually forced attention on that card, and I've deliberately hidden those cups there under my fingers. So very subtly I can choose when to reveal the spilt cups, because if I just show that card straight away, people might focus on the spilt cups. So I can just point to a card and say, if you see this guy here, and then I'm moving attention and focusing attention on particular aspects of the card. Because the worst thing in a tarot card reading is to have the death card come out in the reading somewhere in, say, the past position. The client sees it, and then all of their attention is then on that one card. And I've seen tarot card readers, I was going to say very bad tarot card readers, but let's just say charitably, tarot card readers try and go through the whole reading until they get to the death card, because they've learnt it in a book where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you follow the numbers in a reading, which a good tarot card reader rarely does. They move around the cards once they're laid out, or one at a time, but not necessarily in order, because they've learnt it from a diagram that has numbers on it. They'll move around the reading, but quite often if the death card comes up, you need to see if the client's attention has been brought to that card. And quite often a client's attention will be brought to one particular card automatically as soon as you lay the cards out. And it's really important that you pay attention to where their attention is, because then you can move it around. And it's always good to incorporate that and utilize it by saying, and I can see that you've immediately picked up on this card. And I'm not surprised that you have, because it's a very important card. And now I can use what we did yesterday with linking words, verification, to say, and I can see that your attention is on this card. That's right, isn't it? Your attention's on this card. And it's not surprising that it is, because that card may have a lot of the answers that we seek in this reading for you. Shall we take a look at that card now? And then we incorporate that, and then the client isn't sort of told off for their attention being somewhere else, either explicitly or implicitly, like, oh, stop looking at that card, I just want to read this card. And it shows that we're listening to our client as well. Okay, so attention is very important. Now the other three things on either side of this triangle I'm going to write down are, and we're going to cover these in slightly separate sessions as we go through and how they apply in a tarot card reading. Self-image. Okay, self-image. This is how the person sees themselves. Okay, this is a major part of what a person is, who a person is. Self-image is the next part of themselves, because no matter what you do with somebody, whatever changes you try and make, however you describe the reading, however accurate it is, if their self-image is, I do not deserve to change, or I'm too stupid to understand anything that anyone ever tells me, or I always fail, a bit like Homer Simpson, why bother trying? Trying is just the first part of failing. If their self-image isn't able to take the information that you have, then their problem is going to eat your solution, and that's a terrible thing to happen. I was once training some CBT therapists, and we got off to a slightly wrong foot, because a lot of the things I was sort of teaching them, they couldn't really apply in their setting because of the constraints that they had in their setting. They couldn't tell a client to go out and count 10 rocks. So we had a session. We agreed that we were going to have a session the following morning, and they would show me how they went about dealing with a client, so that I could better calibrate how to work with them in terms of teaching. And I gave them an example of a client I had one time, and they couldn't get things done, and were failing at a lot of things and missing out on a lot of things because they had a sort of obsessive compulsive disorder that they had to do things 24 times. They had to count 24 times in order to do things, and it was like they had to fold the sheets 24 times before putting them away. They had to hoover across a room and count 24, and if they lost count they had to start again to make sure they got to 24. If something couldn't be done 24 times, like folding a sheet, they would fold it 12 times and then unfold it and then fold it again 12 times to make sure it was 24. And this just got locked in their brain as something that they had to do, and it was getting in the way of their life. So I said, well, I'll be the client, and because I was familiar with the client, so I'll be the client and you show me how CBT would go about doing this, because I needed to know so that we could work a bit better and they could teach me something about CBT. And what happened was we went through this process, which was fascinating and obviously very useful in a lot of cases, of like a flow chart, and they did a diagram on this flip chart that I had, because I always try and work with a flip chart. This is a substitute flip chart for me. And they analysed what I was doing, and I tried to answer as if I was that client, and they broke it all down and they explained how to sort of break down the sort of thought process that was leading to this particular compulsion. And I said, and so, okay, that's great. And, you know, sometimes I give homework at the end of a session, a follow-up, something to collapse all of the anchors that we've set up and so on. Something for the client to do, a bit like you, if you were watching yesterday, will have been practicing have will, pivot grammar pivot, I hope I. And they said, well, what we sometimes do is we give them, and I said, do you give them the notes to take away with them so that they can remember it, because it's quite a lot to remember. And they said, yes, of course we do. And so she pulled down the like the sheet, big sheet, A3 sheet, off the flip chart and gave it to me, and I went, oh yeah, great. And of course they said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just folding your solution into my problem. Because that's what the client would have done. Until you actually broke the ability of the client to count properly and show how ridiculous the counting was in itself as a strategy, then it was impossible to explain to the client how to get around the problem. And this is the problem when someone has a self-image and comes to a tarot card reader or any change worker. We need to understand just a little bit about that self-image in order to adequately deliver our oracular divination. So self-image is very important, and we will keep coming back to that as we go through our later sessions. Now, the next thing is very important, as we've just seen with the Erickson story about the stones, which is values. Values. These are the ones in the tarot deck, representative of values. Values is a fundamental point of a human being, and values is like the field, like the general field in which, like stones, something sits. And what sits in the field of values are beliefs. Okay, beliefs. And everyone has beliefs. Even if they believe that they don't believe anything, that's a perfectly good belief. And when you say to someone, what do you believe, and find out, then again, you can help bring their attention to their beliefs, particularly if it's a belief about themselves. That's a very powerful combination of this. If they don't value themselves, then it's very difficult to bring their attention to themselves, and so on. So we can move around this triangle and use our tarot card reading as a way of incorporating and utilizing these fundamental aspects of what a human being actually is in terms of change work. Now, beliefs sit in values in the sense of, if I said to you, do you believe in capital punishment? Now, no matter how you answer that question, a bit like arranging stones in order of importance, I know to answer that question, you have to have some value on human life. You cannot answer the question about a belief about capital punishment unless you have a value of human life. If you have no value on human life, it's going to be very difficult for you to have any belief about the question. Wouldn't even make sense. You wouldn't be able to hold a belief unless you had a particular value. So that's what I mean about a value being a field in which beliefs sit. Okay, and we can hear our clients' beliefs quite often when they come in and say, well, I can't see it getting any better. Okay, when they say I can't see it getting any better, their situation, they have a belief that it can't get any better. Now that belief may be factual in terms of being based on facts, but it's not happening yet, so it is a belief. Okay, so it is a belief. Now the final thing that we can shift for someone to get the most amount of change from them is this. And I'm going to write it in a very specific way, and it's called time space. Okay, the way somebody processes time is fundamental to underpin all of the other things. If someone processes time in a particular way and you change it, then you can have massive impact on the way that they act, behave, believe, their self-image, and so on. And we all know this from for example, post-traumatic stress disorder and things like this, where time doesn't quite work in the way that it would best work for particular situations, so that things feel present and a process has been present even though they're a long way in the past. And that can cause a lot of problems, but also it can change the way someone experiences the world very massively. I was giving a demonstration about 7 or 8 years ago, and someone was sat and we were eliciting their time space, like where they saw the world around them, and their whole future was black. It was just like this whole black tunnel, and it was like literally in front of them, and the more we talked about it, the more they described their future, the worse it was and the closer it was to them, and so on. And it was no wonder that they were feeling low energy, a lack of ambition, very poor self-image, very poor values, very weak values, and very few beliefs about their future, because their time space was totally dark and totally in front of them. And I noticed whilst we were trying all of this NLP stuff that they were sat on a office chair in this particular room that we were using for the classes. And I suddenly thought, I wonder what will happen. And I kicked the office chair and span it round so that suddenly they were facing totally the opposite direction. And I stood literally behind them and I said, what does it look like now? And the change that it resulted in this person, you could literally see their pupils dilate, and it was like, and they altered their state. They completely altered their state because we shifted their sense of time and space. We'd anchored it so much as being, oh, it's in front of me, it's all dark and so on, and then shifted it so dramatically that it was a living metaphor for maybe they could see their world in a very different way. Now, in a tarot card reading, and again, we will come back to this in practical terms over the next few sessions, when you lay out the cards, it's really important to have some idea of how the client is seeing time, because then you can place cards in a particular location that will put them more naturally into their view of the future. And we can move cards entirely, as we saw with the Celtic Cross session that we did quite a few sessions back, out of their view and take them out of their time space as well. Now, in a lot of books, this is called timeline, and there are a lot of books written about timeline therapy and timeline work. I think that's a bit of a problem, because clients have awfully interesting ways of storing time that allows them to do in their heads what they do, and sometimes it's not a straight line, quite the opposite. So I always like to call it time space, because that frees us up to actually look for the space in which the client is holding time, and not automatically start with, are you in time, through time, is your future ahead of you or behind you, and so on. Quite often clients will place it in different directions. Now, to observe all of these as your homework, I want you to listen for people's beliefs and think of what value underpins it. So if someone said, I believe things can get better, then immediately they have to have some value about the future, some value about what does better mean. Does it mean that you're going to be richer, healthier? What does better mean? It sits in a field of values. When people, I want you to listen to see if you can hear people's self-image, like, oh, I'm just not that sort of person, or I didn't think I could do that, and so on. Think of, get your predator triangle and zone in, that's self-image. And when people talk about time, like, oh, just put it to one side, and they move their hands like this, because that is their past over here. They want you to put something over in that direction, even though that's not where your past might be. You know, just look to the future. Just look ahead. Oh, don't keep looking behind you. Just forget about. And they'll move their hand, or they'll move their eyes and goes, well, you know, I was thinking back to when, and they'll look up there. And that shows you how they're storing time inside their heads. Now, there's a lot more about eye movement that we'll perhaps come on to. It's a big part of NLP training, but it's mainly because it trains your attention on another human being in a slightly unnatural and odd way, rather than really telling you a lot about eye movement. Eye movement cues in NLP are useful for about 10 minutes, and they change when someone alters their state, which hopefully you'll be doing during your tarot card reading. So in terms of tarot card reading, I want you to just to listen, and again, the best way of learning NLP is to listen to other people. And I want you to imagine you have this predator homing device suddenly installed in your head, like a visual heads-up display, a HUD in front of you, and listen to people and go, am I listening to a value, a belief, self-image? Where's my attention? Where's their attention? And what does this tell me about how they're processing time and space? And just listen, particularly when someone is in a very specific state or a very strong state. Now, Debbie's asked about ADHD and autism. There are aspects of NLP that I think would work very well for that, because there's a lot of incorporation, utilization and flexibility in NLP that you won't find in a lot of other modalities. So again, it's one of those things where there's a grab bag of techniques, and you have to practice to find the ones that might work for you under different circumstances. So that's your homework, and when you do a tarot card reading or watch somebody do a tarot card reading, say on YouTube or something like this, or in person, listen for how they're processing time. Listen to how they're trying to almost incorporate their own values, beliefs, in what they're doing, rather than the clients, because that's very important as well. We need to be aware of our own ways of doing it so that we can be free to respond to the client's way of doing it, because that gives us a more powerful reading. Okay, so that's just a general model that we're going to hook a load of things onto. Now, the other thing that I would want to say at this point, and that you can practice with your own readings and clients, is this. In NLP, there's something called, I guess, meta patterns or meta models, just ways that people think about the world that are different in different people. And one of those ways is the one we all know, which is chunking. And basically that's big picture and little picture, detailed thinking and just helicopter thinking, just sky high thinking. And there's some people that have the whole world as a big blurry blob, and it's all very vague and doesn't really have any edges to it. And there are some people who are very detailed with a lot of edges and so on. And when you do a tarot card reading, you will automatically, and again, this is, say, NLP will change the way you look at everyone and think about things forever, so I do apologize in advance for that, that when you watch someone do a tarot card reading, you will see the way they, whether they're a big picture or small picture person, whether they chunk small or they chunk big. And if you do it opposite to how your client naturally does it, then you will lose a lot of the communication and a lot of the advantage that you might have to communicate to them on their wavelength. And it's very easy to calibrate it, and that's why I wanted to teach it as one of our first practical techniques in that area of NLP. And when you lay out the cards, on the table, or even sometimes if you show them a picture online, if you're doing a sort of Skype or Zoom session or live video session, watch what happens. You'll be concentrating naturally on the cards, but out of the corner of your eye, watch whether they move back slightly or move forward slightly. That will tell you most of the time whether they're a detailed thinker or a big picture thinker. If they move back slightly so they can see the whole spread, or look at you, or look at the room, don't think they're not paying attention because you're a detailed person, and to you that means they're not paying attention. It just means that they are a different thinker. They think big, so they need to see you, they need to see the room, they need to see all of the cards. They're not interested in the detail because they're going to hold the whole framework of the reading. And if they do that, what you do is you also go back yourself, and then you say, I want to look at the whole reading first. Even if that's not your natural style, what you have to learn with NLP is to be flexible in your own thinking. And that's why you need to listen to other people a lot more. You need to be able to go to where they are in order to communicate better. So if they go forwards and then immediately focus their attention on one card, you probably know that they're a detailed thinker. So no matter whether you're a big thinker, small thinker, whichever way you go to them, go and meet them, and in the detail of that card, and say, I notice you're immediately drawn to these cups in this card. Now, one of the things with these cups, and ignore the rest of the reading, just focus right down on these cups and the detail, because then you're responding to the client. And again, all of these things are totally optional. They're just layers. In terms of which deck are better for NLP, any deck. Different decks will open up different possibilities for your communication skills or methods that that you might want to learn with NLP, or other methods like clean language and so on. But for now, I'll just basically use, I might start to use the Thoth cards as well, just to make sure that we don't get fixated on one particular deck. It's a good point. But there's a number of things for you to look at already. So listen to people, watch people, self-image, values, beliefs, time, space, and attention. Watch how people move around those. Because if you take someone's self-image away, you take their values away, take all of their beliefs away, take their concept of time and space away, take their attention away, then you don't really have a person anymore. You just have a completely blank slate that you can work with. And it's quite interesting to be able to do that to yourself or to someone else, because it's almost a quite transcendent experience in itself. Okay, so that's all I'm going to cover today for our second bit of introduction to NLP. I'm now going to read our bedtime story from Invisible Cities. It's quite a short one. It does have some relationship to what we're talking about, I hope. So if you'd like to settle in for our bedtime story, I'm going to read from Calvino's Invisible Cities again, one of the later cities in the section called Hidden Cities. I will need to put my glasses on for this. In Raissa, life is not happy. People wring their hands as they walk in the streets, curse the crying children, lean on the railings over the river and press their fists to their temples. In the morning you wake from one bad dream and another begins. At the workbenches where every moment you hit your finger with a hammer or prick it with a needle, or over the columns of figures all awry in the ledgers of merchants and bankers, or at the rows of empty glasses on the zinc counters of the wine shops, the bent heads at least conceal the general grim gaze. Inside the houses it is worse, and you do not have to enter to learn this. In the summer the windows resound with quarrels and broken dishes. And yet, in Raissa, at every moment there is a child in a window who laughs seeing a dog that has jumped onto a shed to bite into a piece of polenta dropped by a stonemason who has shouted from the top of the scaffolding, "Darling, let me dip into it," to a young serving maid who holds up a dish of ragu under the pergola, happy to serve it up to the umbrella maker who is celebrating a successful transaction. A white lace parasol bought to display at the races by a great lady in love with an officer who has smiled at her taking her last jump. Happy man, and still happier his horse, flying over the obstacles, seeing a francolin flying in the sky. Happy bird freed from its cage by a painter, happy at having painted it feather by feather, speckled with red and yellow in the illumination of that page in the volume where the philosopher says. Also in Raissa, city of sadness, there runs an invisible thread that binds one living being to another for a moment, then unravels, then is stretched again between moving points as it draws new and rapid patterns, so that at every second the unhappy city contains a happy city, unaware of its own existence. The City of Raissa in Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. Perhaps he's not talking about cities. Okay, so thank you for your time and attention. We will be covering more NLP and practical methods of applying it to tarot and change work as the days go on. I hope that certainly from Europe today we've had better news about the curve of infection rates of the epidemics in each of the countries, and I look forward to better results over the next few days as well. And my thoughts are with people who are immediately suffering in all of the different ways that this is affecting us. As Shakespeare says, one touch of nature makes all the world akin, and I hope that that is something that we're all going to take out of this. Me, myself, I'm definitely going to take that out of this into the future as we come out of this. So thanks a lot for your time and attention. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Again, I hope Aisha has stayed along for her second wave as well. Here's a second wave for you. And I look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow as well. Okay, take care everyone, and bye for now.